Really? Okay.
Yes.
And you've lived up to that, obviously, several books and all these, the whole figuring the meaning of life and the world as we live in
Well,
it.
I've been published in 12 different scientific fields, either published or given scholarly lectures at scholarly conferences in everything from quantum physics and cosmology to evolutionary biology, evolutionary psychology, neuroscience, information science, and governance. And I'm leaving out a whole bunch of them.
We only have 4 hours, so I appreciate you trimming the list. But yeah, your CV is incredible. Given your expertise, I just have to pick your brain. Are we in big trouble right now with the invisible virus friend?
Yeah, we're in very big trouble with the invisible virus because the invisible virus could easily kill 2.2 million Americans. It's the social distancing and these things, the face coverings that is preventing that. But if we hold the death rate to the current level, by the end of a year, we will have killed 300,000 people will have died. Now, 300,000 people is a lot better than 2.2 million. And we have a president who has no brain. He has the brain of a goldfish. Even a goldfish has a greater moral sensibility than he does, a greater moral compass. So we're in very deep trouble because he is trying to get us all back together, spitting in each other's faces in bars, which is exactly what they're doing in Wisconsin right now. And that's a great way to transmit the disease. South Korea made the mistake. South Korea, the minute the virus hit, the South Korean head, Moon, brought in the people he trusted from his drug industry and medical devices industry and said, you are going to develop a test for this instantly. And I am going to make sure that you go through any bureaucratic roadblocks. So they did testing and they isolated the people who were carrying the coronavirus. You know, you and I could easily be carrying it. We feel healthy as horses, but that's called being asymptomatic. Nonetheless, we could be carrying. So they isolated all the carriers. Do you know how many deaths they've had? They have had 287 deaths. By Tuesday, we will have had 100,000 deaths. There is a big difference. Okay, last week they made a big mistake. They opened up their bars. And just from one bar, 50 people ended up infected with the coronavirus. Not a good idea. So, but we have Mr. Stupid, Mr. Potato Head in the White House. And he thinks that testing is bad because he counts his numbers, his ratings. That's the only thing he's really good at, counting his rating. And he regards the figure of the number of people counted as infected with the coronavirus as being his ratings. And he doesn't want those ratings to go up. He wants them to stay down. So the less testing, the better his ratings look. And the more he can claim that we have prevailed against this virus. We haven't. This is just the beginning. The Spanish flu of 1918 lasted 2 years. It came in 4 waves. The first wave, everybody thought, okay, everything's going back to normal, and they went back to normal. Big mistake. The second wave killed far more people than the first wave, and this went on for 2 years. We could be in for the same sort of thing. Our science is more sophisticated, but hey, look at this Rick Chance, or Rick, whatever his name was, Wright, the guy who just testified yesterday. He tried to warn the government about the fact that we were going to run out of personal protective equipment, that we were not prepared for the virus, that we needed a national plan back in January. And he was rebuffed at every step of the way. And then when he refused to flood New Jersey and New York with hydroxychloroquine, which is the thing that Stupid in the White House is convinced is the cure, he was bounced from office to bring in a yes man instead of a trained scientist. And with moves like that, this president is going to be guilty of mass murder. He already is. Think of what would have happened had he done testing immediately, starting in January, when the South Koreans did it. We too could have, 250 cases or something like that, 1,000 cases instead of 100,000 cases. So we're in deep shit.
Yeah.
We have a system that allows 48.5% of the country to win to get the vote, meaning they don't have a majority, and yet get their president. It has happened with George Bush, where there was a sneaky maneuver in the Supreme Court, and now it's happened with Bozo, the guy with the orange hair. And this is going to be the worst. There are some experts who say America has been degraded radically in its international influence, in the seriousness with taken, and all kinds of measures over the course of the last 3 years. And Bozo wants to degrade it even farther because he doesn't know anything. As long as he can use his narcissistic delusions that have served him well as a con man in the real estate industry to try to con us. The first step when you're a con man, apparently this one anyway, is to con yourself. It's to be a psychopath. Now, the definition of a psychopath is a person without a conscience. A person without conscience. And Donald Trump is that person. He is the archetypal psychopath. So he cons himself into believing things. And he surrounds himself with yes men who will tell him that what he believes is true. Now, once upon a time, there was a leader called Mao Zedong in China. He was the man who established the modern communist state. And he came up with a brilliant 5-year plan for taking China from a dirt poor agrarian economy to a communist paradise. And it was called the Great Leap Forward. And people started to come to him, and the people were starving to death. And he fired those people. And he replaced them with people who would tell him that his plan was going brilliantly and that all the rumors about people starving, those were being promoted by his political enemies. Sounded all familiar? And the result was, of surrounding himself by yes men, is that Mao Zedong's Great Leap Forward killed 45 million Chinese. And Donald Trump is doing what Mao Zedong did. Does that bode well for you and me? Not at all.
Every friend I have, I was involved a little bit in finance before this and moved to Hong Kong after college. Everyone I know that's involved.
Fantastic.
Oh, it was amazing. My father said, "You want to learn finance? Forget business school. Go work in Hong Kong, for a couple of years. You'll see how it's done." And everyone I still am in contact with will not touch America. They pulled out every investment. Some of them are really significant major players, or their family money is. They are embarrassed for us. They keep asking me, what am I doing? How is this happening? And I have no explanation other than, like you said, one person, one vote, gerrymandering, and the system we have in place with, all you need is to win 2 states pretty much. And then you just have these people, toothless inbreds who vote, go, Mr. Warrior, the alpha male. And we're gonna beat Mao. I bet we beat Mao. There's time. We'll catch up to Mao's death.
Let's hope not. Let's hope the governors stay sane, at least some of them. Except the problem is, if you develop a hotspot in one state, it spreads to every other state. There's no such thing as an isolated geographic area. I mean, we got this from Wuhan, China, for God's sakes. Well, Wuhan, China is a big jump. And if it can jump from Wuhan, China to the United States, how difficult is it to jump from Atlanta to New York City? It's not difficult at all.
Well, I mean,
happens all the time.
Air travel. Talk about no guidance from the top. We have air travel. I can get on a plane right now, and he could use the Wartime Powers Act to open up meat packing facilities.
Oh God, that was terrible. You know how many cases of coronavirus there are in meat packing plants as of 3 days ago? 14,000. 14,000 cases of coronavirus in meatpacking plants. We need those meatpacking plants. I, for one, couldn't survive without the meat. Nonetheless, we have a real problem, and Bozo in the White House has no clue. All he's looking at is his ratings.
Yeah, artificially manipulated by non-testing.
And meanwhile, but the problems with the Electoral College, he managed to win by knowing how to play the game of the Electoral College better than Hillary Clinton knew how to play that game. It was an astonishing feat that he pulled off. But he did it with a minority of the vote. Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes. The real problem that allows that is, ironically, horribly, in the Constitution itself. when the constitutional founders were writing the Constitution, in order to bring the small states on board, because the small states were terrified of being crushed by the big states, drowned out, they created a Congress in which you had proportional representation, and they created a Senate in which every single state got 2 votes, no matter how small the state. Well, that means that the folks in Wyoming have 160 times more voting power per person than the people in California. And so the real problem, so the real problem goes back to the compromise of roughly, say, in 1789, in which the small states were offered this sop to keep them on board. Now, how we undo that in our lifetimes, I don't know. It takes forever to get a constitutional amendment across, and the Republicans are very good at organizing and would defeat any constitutional amendment of that sort. So Joe Biden is following the path of Hillary Clinton. He's accumulating more voters than Donald Trump, but not in the key states that turn the Electoral College. So we're looking at a repeat, possibly. Plus this business of, and look, the Wisconsin thing, where the Wisconsin judge who said you absolutely must go to the voting booth in order to vote in the primaries, should be hung for murder. Because 50 of the people who were brave enough, who thought their vote was important enough to risk their lives in this coronavirus epidemic, 50 of those people came down with the coronavirus epidemic. This is one of the most lethal diseases we have ever seen. It's certainly the most lethal in our lifetime. And the judge is a killer. He should not be on the bench. He should be in jail.
No, there are countless people across the government that it's war crimes, terrorism, all kinds of horrible things that they're doing. I'll tell you something crazy. I'm right in New York, and I'm invited to private parties with hundreds of people that are kind of like on rooftops with no light to hang out and just, drink and do stuff, whatever. And I always say, oh, I'm busy, I have to work, because I don't want to come out and say, you moron, you're going to die or someone's going to get sick that you love. How can you do that? And these are not people who, let's say, didn't finish school and had tough upbringings. These are people who are accomplished and successful and attending these parties where how do you not acknowledge the fact of this is how it spreads and certain percentage will die, and you're just playing Russian roulette to stand on a rooftop with a virus versus a gun.
Absolutely. I mean, it's crazy. I don't get invited to these parties. I'm out in Park Slope, Brooklyn. But I walk 6 miles in Prospect Park every day. Okay. It allows me to do work. I can do meetings while I'm walking. I can listen to books while I'm walking. I can get stuff done I wouldn't be able to get done at home. However, ever since the beginning of the lockdown in New York State, the number of people in the park on a sunny day is ferocious. It is huge. People come to picnics in groups of 8 and 12, and they sit around, and yes, it's true that the open air dispels the micro droplets that carry the coronavirus. So there are odds, and the sunshine also kills some coronavirus. So their odds are much lower than if they were doing this at home, having a dinner party, but it is frightening to see when you realize how easily this is transmitted. And I have to maintain 12 feet from everybody, which means walking.
No 6 feet, no 6 feet.
Yes.
It's not 6, it's 12.
I'm in the target zone. Now, admittedly, I'm at the very beginning of the next 20 years of my career. And that's the next 20 years is going to be the most important and intense part of my career. But the fact is, and I do 1,220 dynamic plankings a morning, 5 days a week, 1,220. And so I'm in really good shape. I don't look it on camera here, but with one of these webcams that looks up your nostrils.
Yeah, no one looks good. But
the fact is, I'm 76 friggin' years old.
I never thought that. Oh wow, you look good. You do look good.
Yeah. So and the woman I love is 51, and the woman I had, my girlfriend before that, was a woman who started pursuing me about 5 years ago or something like that. And I didn't pay any attention to her, which is rare. I usually pay attention to everybody. I'm deeply appreciative of anybody who has the least appreciation for me. But I just didn't see her. And she continued to pursue me for 2 years. And I finally said yes, figuring that if she's pursuing me for 2 years, she must know who I am and what I'm about. And
She
love me
values you. She understands.
yeah. She was, when she started to pursue me, she was 19 years old. When I finally said yes, she was 21 years old. When the relationship broke up, she was 22 years old. She was doing too much marijuana and alcohol. So she basically zoned out of the relationship. So having a 51-year-old person I love more than anything else on planet Earth, there's a 25-year difference. It bothers her tremendously. It doesn't bother me a bit. Not a bit. So then there's a reason it doesn't bother me. Because in 1988, when I was a legend in the music publicity business, I got really sick. And I had to go into my office one day and say to my staff, I don't know what's wrong with me. My doctors don't know what's wrong with me. I could be dying, and I'm going to be out of here in 2 weeks. I'm giving you the business. And for the next 3 years, well, I spent 15 years in bed. I spent 15 years not being able to walk further than my bathroom. And for 5 of those years, I was too weak to talk and too weak to have another person in the room with me. So and while I was in that condition, I wrote 3 books, all of which have been published, and I founded 2 international scientific groups while I couldn't talk. But one of the things that I learned was my wife of 32 years at that point said, sex is over. The doors are closed. Well, we hadn't had much of a sex life to begin with. We were not really sexual with each other. And I figured, if you don't understand sex, you don't understand life. You don't understand the richness of your own emotions. You don't understand the richness of other people's emotions. There are whole vast frontiers of human emotional possibility that you're never going to see. And I'm on this planet to experience as many adventures as I can and as many strange emotional territories as I can in order to bring back wisdom, that will help you see the infinite in the tiniest of things. That's my job on this planet. So when my wife closed the doors to sex and started divorcing me, I went online and started to be a super Lothario, because after all, I'm a writer, right? So I have an advantage online.
Absolutely.
And what I discovered is, I discovered that souls come alive online. Now, what does that mean? It means, let's imagine you are a woman. You weigh 350 pounds through no fault of your own. You keep reducing your eating and you still keep gaining weight. You have the face of a bulldog, the little bulldog on a Mack truck, the hood ornament. You didn't choose that body.
Nope.
You didn't choose that face. It landed on you by accident. That body and face do not reflect who you really are. But if you meet another person online, that other person has no clue as to what you look like physically. And that person meets your fucking soul online. Really meet who you are online. So I was astonished. In an email to the woman that I love yesterday, I said, we are married in the land where souls dance. And what is souls dance? It's the land of electrons. It's the land of Skype, phone conversations, emails, chats, Telegram, WhatsApp, etc. Now, I've been with the woman that I love twice, because she lives in South Africa. I've been with her twice in person. I was supposed to go there in April for my 3rd time with her. And then the coronavirus came and changed everything. Just changed everything. So it's made our relationship much more complicated, but we are going to prevail, to use a word that has been polluted recently by Donald Trump. We are going to triumph over these obstacles. We will. I am absolutely determined. Now, of course, it's not in my hands. It's in the hands of the 2 of us. And that only exists so long as she has the same will that I do. But there are many more ways to meet each other, and even to meet each other sexually. After all, sexuality, I don't know about you, I find that sexuality gets to the very core of what soul is all about. It gets to the selves in you that you do not know you have. And they come out of you. They come out of you in dance. They come out of you in a rock and roll performance. And they come out in sex. When I was 12 years old, I realized just how arid the Judaism I was being taught was. And that it didn't contain any element of ecstasy. It didn't contain any element of stepping outside yourself and having a spiritual experience that is like becoming a bonfire. That it's as if you are a charcoal briquette, somebody has poured lighter fluid all over you and lit a match. And all of a sudden, this flame of incandescence comes dancing from you. And I've been in pursuit of that since I was 12 or 13 years old. I found it in rock and roll for 18 years. Bless rock and roll. Thank you, rock and roll. And I found it in sex with the woman that I love. So these things are connected. These things are connected. It's not just sex, drugs, and rock and roll in the negative sense. But that phrase, when it was first coined in the 1970s, was used. It's the land where souls dance. It's a matter of finding the land where souls dance.
I gotta write that down. That's so good. Land where souls dance. I love the way you think, I've always thought the same thing you did, maybe in a simpler way. But anyone who ever brought up the meaning of life, I said I don't know about meaning of life, but it's create experiences. That is what you can do, and that's the best way to take what you have, your time here on Earth. Just create those experiences, and that will be the meaning of life for you, because you collectively will look back and go, I did this, I tasted that, I went here. And that's all you can do. The whole thing of accumulating.
And the greater number of these extreme experiences you can have, the more you can offer to your fellow human beings, because the more you can open their eyes. One of the reasons that I am so passionately devoted to Michael Jackson, who was the greatest person I've ever met in my life. Now, let's take a step back. I've worked with Prince, Bob Marley, AC/DC, Aerosmith, Billy Joel, Billy Idol, Paul Simon, Peter Gabriel, really extraordinary people. I've worked with Buzz Aldrin and the Sixth Man to Land on the Moon, Edgar Mitchell. I have worked at very high level. I have a group right now that includes a 3-star general. I lead this group, Chance. And it includes a 3-star general. It includes the former governor of New York State. And it includes, of all people, brace yourself, Newt Gingrich.
No.
Newt Gingrich.
What are you doing with Newt? Oh, wow.
Well, I hated and loathed Newt. Sure. I'm a Democrat. I'm a liberal. But somebody called me or emailed me one day from the space community and said, I have a meeting with Newt Gingrich on Friday. Can you come? Well, I dropped everything and I changed my sleep schedule so I could be awake at the hour of the meeting. And I came. I trained down to Washington. Because if you're trying to effectuate things, if you're actually trying to save Western civilization and trying to save your fellow human beings, you need to get wherever the power is. And you need to try to influence wherever the power is. But if you can't get close to wherever the power is, you can't influence it. Mm-hmm. So that said yes. And but I get laid down one condition. I said, I just came up with a project at Maxwell Air Force Base 2 weeks ago. And I'm the leader on this team. And my partner is a 3-star general. Can I bring him too? And the answer was yes. So the general flew in from Montgomery, Alabama. I trained down from New York City. And when we reached the room where there was a big conference table, there was a jostling for position. And the pole position was a position immediately to Newt Gingrich's right. And I tried to jostle the general into that position. And he outmaneuvered me. And I ended up in that position. So now, in the same way, one of my most meaningful experiences with Michael Jackson, my right elbow was up against his left elbow. My right knee was up against his right knee. And it allowed me to feel who Michael really was. I was literally knee to knee. My left knee to Newt Gingrich's right knee with Newt. And they had a bunch of people giving presentations at the table. I was the last one. And I gave a presentation on our $2 billion moon program, which is what I had come up with at Montgomery Air Force Base with the general and a bunch of other people. And Newt Gingrich was like granite. He looked like a figure carved on Mount Rushmore. I feel, and I could be wrong, but I feel I'm very good at reading people's body language and facial cues. And I looked for facial cues. I saw nothing. And I realized I had failed. And Chance, I don't like to fail. I
No,
really don't like it. But sometimes you do. And I knew this was a failure. And 3 weeks later, Newt joined our team.
wow.
So, yes, so apparently looking like a stone statue is one of Newt's tricks. Because he had, right. So when I told the governor and I were on a radio show together. There's a guy named John Katsimatidis who ran for mayor of New York City on the Republican ticket, which means he got 4 votes. But he has a radio show, and he is very well connected politically. So he had a radio show in which he had the former governor of New York State. Now, I had never heard anything good about this governor, and I didn't think that he was anybody exceptional. Then I heard him talk. He's fucking brilliant. He's terrific. He's amazing. Well, I wanted to get his phone number from the people who put the show together, but Chance, there are 1,000 things I want to do every day, and I can only do 6 of them. Right. So I never got around to doing it. And then one day on my walk through the park, I told you I had phone meetings and stuff like that on my walks. And my walk through the park, I got a phone call. And it was from a number I didn't know. And it was David Paterson, the former governor of New York State. So I tried to look for one of the projects I was working on that might interest him, where he could be useful. And I hit him with the space project. I said, look, space is really the Green New Deal. Here's how it works. If we harvest solar power in space and we transmit it to Earth using the kind of harmless radio waves that your cell phone uses, we can eliminate the use, or we can eliminate man-made carbon emissions completely, 100%. We can eliminate the use of fossil fuels for energy production completely, forever. And I worked on this for 4 years with the 11th president of India, Dr. APJ Kalam. And Kalam, who is an expert in poverty, said, with space solar power, we can lift 2 billion people out of poverty. That's the whole thing. And I want to get this across to Democrats and haven't been able to do it. David got wildly excited. So I said, you want to come on a team in which I'm working with Newt Gingrich. And David, like me, loves working across the aisle. He loves working across the aisle. And believe me, only people who can work across the aisle are going to get anything done. So as of 2 weeks ago, he became a member of this team. But imagine, so I work at these fairly high levels, right? But Michael Jackson is head and shoulders above any other human I have ever met on Earth. And this has to do with experiencing every extreme adventure you can so that you have something of value to bring back to mankind. When I was 16, I had spent 2 years wildly enthusiastic about poetry. And I discovered 2 poems. One was the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot, which said, if you have something important to do in life, if you have something to do that you feel will make you heroic, that will make young women crawling to you, you have to start that project now. Not tomorrow, not next week. This minute, you have to start that project. Why? Because if you put it off to tomorrow, you'll next put it off to next week. If you put it off to next week, you'll put it off to next month. By the time you're finished, you'll have put it off to next year. And by the time you wake up at the age of 50, and you will suddenly realize that your life force has diminished. The strength with which you could have accomplished is going to utterly define it for you. So do it now. And there was a second poem by Edna St. Vincent Millay, and it's called Renaissance. Edna St. Vincent Millay wrote this when she was 16 years old. In the beginning, she's a young woman on her back in a clearing in the forest, and all she sees is the trees closing in around her and the sky above her is very small. And then she has a mystical experience. She goes out roaming, her spirit goes out roaming the world. She sees people in a ship, a sinking ship, dying, and she feels their terror. She feels people dying of starvation in India, and she feels their pain. She goes around the world having these experiences, these extreme human experiences. And when she comes back to herself again, she says the earth, well, suddenly those forest trees that she has felt were hemming in her in look like they have made extra space for her, lots of it. The sky that she felt was so small now looks enormous to her. And she says the earth stands out on either side no wider than the heart is wide. Above the earth there stands the sky no higher than the soul is high. And those two poems became my marching orders, among my marching orders for life. So the interpretation of Edna St. Vincent Millay was have every extreme experience in the human emotions you possibly can so that you can see the infinite in the tiniest of things. And you can convey that infinity to your fellow human beings, because that is really the end goal. The end goal is to expand the perceptual envelope of humankind. Some people are able to do that, most of us can't. But that's my fucking job, period. That's why I'm on this planet. There's no other reason I should be here. And Michael was so far beyond me, it was as if I was 1 inch tall and he was 6 feet tall. He just, when it came to the realm of human spirit, when it came to the quality of awe, amazement, astonishment, and curiosity, Michael was 1,000 times what any other human being I've ever met was. And I got involved in science at the age of 10. You know, I had no idea what I was when I was a kid. When I was 5 years old and 6 years old, none whatsoever. And then when I was 10, a book appeared in my lap when I was in my family's living room. And it was a book I was unfamiliar with. It was not one of the books my parents had in the same places on the shelves all my life. And I opened the book and it said the first 2 rules of science are these: the truth at any price, including the price of your life. And it gave the example of Galileo, and it told the story all wrong, Chance. It told the stories of Galileo who had been willing to go to the stake for his truth. That's not true. Galileo, the Pope, who was first prosecuting Galileo, was a friend of Galileo's. Galileo went to him and said, I will abjure everything I've ever written. I will say everything I've ever written is wrong, as long as you don't put me to the stake. So he ended up with 9 years of house arrest. But the wrong story, the heroic story in which he was willing to go to the stake to defend his truth, that's what I needed to hear at the age of 10. I needed an example of courage. And rule number 2 of science is look at things right under your nose as if you've never seen them before, and then proceed from there. Look for things that everybody around you and you take for granted, that are invisible to you. Flush them into visibility, and then proceed from there. And it gave the example of Anton von Leeuwenhoek, the man who invented the microscope, who turned his microscope down on pond water and saw a whole world we had never known existed, the world of microbes. So those became my marching orders for life. Michael Jackson was the living incarnation of those.
It just froze. Your image froze. Shit.
We're going to do something else. Okay, we just had some sort of connection problem. I'm going to put us on tethering. So hang on a second, because the connection is. We go to settings. No, I have not had a message from the woman I love. Settings. Okay, here's settings. Come on. Give me connections. Give me, it's at the bottom, mobile hotspot and tethering. And I have 87% of battery. That should do. Turn off Wi-Fi. Okay. Turn on mobile hotspot. And okay, let me switch the connection to the mobile hotspot. Hang on. We may lose connection.
You got it.
Okay, hang on. There it is. Connect automatic.
Uh-oh. Now we're in trouble. We lost our friend. Hey, everybody, we may be in trouble. Our genius, PR, master, understander of the world is not on the site anymore. Thank you for joining us. If anyone is even there. Oh, somebody gives a heart. Thank you. So Dracon Zord gave us a heart. Thank you, Dracon. Ah, good, good, good.
Oh, you
He's
got
back.
me. Okay. Good.
All right.
Fortunately, the Verizon connection, which is FiOS, it's photo optics, despite its sophistication, is shit. And
Speaking of that,
so I was trying to get us on the tethering, but it wouldn't let me on, and I don't know why. So
okay.
let me just turn off the tethering so we don't burn out the battery. Okay, so yeah. Come on, off. There we go. All right, so we were back to finding the infinite in the tiniest of things. So, and so you combine that with the fact that I've been fascinated with the ecstatic experience, which I did. I realized I was an atheist when I was 12, and so I had a bar mitzvah, so I didn't tell anybody I was an atheist. I didn't even allow myself to tell it to myself, because after all, this is going to be the first party in Buffalo, New York, my hometown, that I was actually going to be invited to.
And a paid invite.
Yes, and there were going to be presents. So my bar mitzvah was in June. I spent the rest of June, July, and August writing 200 thank you notes to people for the presents. And when I was finished, it was almost September, and I was finally free to confess that I was an atheist. Now, the problem with September is that the high holidays, the Jewish high holidays, take place in September. Now, my parents were not observant. They only went to the synagogue when there were weddings and bar mitzvahs of friends of theirs. But when it came to the high holidays, that was really, really important to them. So they got me into a suit. I don't know how they did it, because I hate suits. They got me into their blue Fraser four-door automobile, a sturdy American-made car. They got me all the way to Richmond Avenue, the tree-lined avenue where the synagogue was, and then I refused to go any further. So there I was. My parents were grabbing me by the ankles and trying to drag me out of the car. I was holding on to this sturdy American-made door frame for all I was worth. And as my parents tugged at my ankles, shredding the socks of their firstborn child, something occurred to me. Isaac Newton Galileo made his discoveries by taking a device designed for horizontal viewing. It was designed to see the enemy troops coming over the horizon before the enemy troops realized you knew they were there. It was called a spyglass, brand new military invention. And Galileo managed to get the plans, for one, and started building them himself. And then he had the audacity to turn this spyglass for horizontal viewing up and look at the sky. Now, why was this ridiculous? Because the sky is God's underwear. You do not look under God's underwear. The sky was the floor of God's living room. Aristotle had told everybody exactly what was in the sky. It was perfect circles. Why? Because circles are perfection, according to Aristotle. So what else could be in the sky but perfection, right? It's God's own territory. And Galileo discovered that things were lumpy and bumpy and like rocks on Earth. So the previous vision of the sky just didn't work. Now, how did Galileo achieve this? By turning his horizontal device vertical. Anton von Leeuwenhoek was a draper. He imported drapes, he imported cloth and sold it in Amsterdam. And he used a lens, the same new high-tech gadget, to see how fine the weave was on fabrics that were in front of him. So he was also using the lens for horizontal viewing. So he decided, he had the audacity to turn that horizontal device down. And what did he discover? He looked at pond water and discovered a world even more complex than the world we know, but a world that no human had ever perceived before, the world of microorganisms. So I had a realization. My parents are pulling at my ankles and threatening to pull my shoes off, and I'm holding onto the door frame, and I realized there are gods in this picture. There are no gods in the sky. There are no gods under the earth. I'm an atheist, right? There is something of God in somewhere in my parents. Look at the ferocious passion with which they are trying to get me up to the synagogue. And if there are gods inside of my parents, there are gods inside of me. And my job is not to turn the lens up. It's not to turn the lens down. It's to turn the lens in here and find the gods inside of us. And that became my mission. Find the ecstatic experience, find the gods inside of us, see the infinite in the tiniest of things. If you have anything heroic to do, start it now. Have every extreme adventure you possibly can in order to expand your ability to see the infinite in the tiniest of things. And in order to expand something I didn't realize existed until many, many years later, the perceptual envelope of humanity. And here's how that works. In 1954, there was a guy named Roger Bannister. The physiologists, the greatest experts at the time, had said that it was humanly impossible to run a mile in less than 4 minutes. Humanly impossible. Roger Bannister was a medical school student. He worked with another medical student friend. They analyzed his run. They found every energy-wasting move that he made, and they trained to eliminate it. And Roger Bannister did the impossible. He ran the 4-minute mile. Well, if you look up and he expanded the envelope of possibility of all of humanity. What does that mean? It means that if you look up the 4-minute mile in Wikipedia, it will tell you that every major competitive runner now automatically breaks the 4-minute mile, that it's been broken 1,800 times. So you exceed the current boundaries of the perceptual envelope or the envelope possibilities of humanity, and you grow it for good. You grow it for others. There's another story that fits here. At one point, I had none of my, I was the head of East Coast Public and Artist Relations for Gulf and Western's 14 record companies. I had founded their Public and Artist Relations department. We had an artist named Bill Chinnick. Bill Chinnick's music was undistinguished and his voice was undistinguished, but there was something strange about his guitar playing. So Bill told the following story. Because his music was mediocre, he had to play little clubs. And he was playing a little club in New Jersey. And there was a little old man in the back of the audience. And when the show was over and everybody else emptied out, the little old man came to the foot of the stage and said, "Son, how did you do that?" And Bill said, "Well, sir, I grew up admiring Les Paul, and I sat there with his records on my turntable, and I practiced for 3 years and couldn't quite get it, and then I finally got it. I was finally able to play like Les Paul." And the little old man said, "Son, I am Les Paul. Don't you realize I invented multi-tracking?" In other words, Bill Chinnick had learned to do what 8 Les Pauls did.
Oh my God.
Expanding the envelope of possibility of humanity. That is expanding the perceptual envelope of humanity. So my job in life is to expand the perceptual envelope of humanity. But the person who did that the most was Michael Jackson. He felt that his quality of awe and wonder was a gift from God. And because God had given it to him, it was his responsibility to give it to his kids. And my ultimate confrontation, I had 2 major meetings with Michael. I've had others. These were the 2 that taught me who Michael really was. And meeting number 1, the first time that I met Michael Jackson, and this is about rule number 2 of science. Look at things right under your nose as if you've never seen them before, and then proceed from there. See the infinite in the tiniest of things. So the brothers and I were very, very close. And we were in Marlon Jackson's pool house. A pool house is a little house with 1 room per floor, and it only has 2 floors. And the first floor room has, the walls are lined with arcade games, which were much too expensive for anybody to own at that point in time. And there's a billiard table in the center of the room. So the brothers and I were standing at the billiard table, and they put me right in the middle. They were flanking me. And we were talking about their merchandise, and I was trying to explain to them, if you sell a T-shirt, it has to be a gift of awe and wonder in itself, because that's what you stand for. And with everything that you sell, every piece of merchandise, that has to reflect who you are. So brothers were giving me a leadership position in this meeting. But I knew Michael was coming. So I heard the screen door open. And I did not grow up among other human beings. Other kids wanted to have nothing to do with me in Buffalo, New York. And my parents didn't seem to want to have anything to do with me either. So, but when I was 19 years old, somebody taught me that if there's somebody people want you to meet, you walk up to that person, you put your hand out, and you say, "Hi, I'm Howard." And the other person says, "Hi, I'm," and fill in the blank. So even though I grew up with guppies and laboratory rats and guinea pigs in my bedroom who don't have social etiquette of this kind, I had learned 1 rule of social etiquette. So I heard the screen door open, yes, and I walked over and I put out my hand and I said, "Hi, I'm Howard." Now, I had read 1,000 articles on Michael Jackson, more or less. And every article said the same thing. He's a bubble baby. If you try to touch him, he will withdraw. Michael did not withdraw. He put out his hand. We had a normal handshake. It wasn't one of those handshakes in which you try to crush the other person to indicate how much more powerful you are. Yeah. It was a normal handshake, a soft handshake, but not effeminate, just soft. And he said, "Hi, I'm Michael." But it was even simpler. "Hi, I'm Michael." And I said, "I've got a press release to read you. I need to get your approval on it. Can we go somewhere where I can read it to you?" So we went up to the 2nd floor, which was jammed literally to the ceiling with amplifiers, keyboards, mostly amplifiers and keyboards. So Michael found a spot where he could sit on 1 amplifier. I found a spot where I could sit on another amplifier. And I started to read the press release to him. And as I read it, Michael was like this in his seat initially. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. And he went, oh, 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 until he was practically horizontal by the end of the press release. And then he said from his horizontal position, did you write that? Well, of course I'd written it. And he said, that's beautiful. And here's something else you have to understand. When I was 12 years old, something happened to me in 8th grade that had never happened to me before in my life. A girl turned her eyes in my direction. And then she did something even more shocking. She made eye contact. And she said, pointing at me, I told my mom that you understand the theory of relativity. Well, I have been in science since I was 10. I've been reading 2 books a day, 1 book under the desk at school, another book at home. I don't know how many books that is. It's roughly 2,000 books in 2 years. And yes, and I acquired my first scientific chops. I built my first Boolean algebra machine, a symbolic logic machine. I had co-designed a computer that won some science fair awards. My mom, who normally didn't have time for me, had taken me off to the University of Buffalo for a meeting with the head of the graduate physics department at the University of Buffalo. And I would imagine it was going to be a 5-minute courtesy call, because what head of a graduate physics department wants to hang around with a 12-year-old kid? And we didn't come out of his office for an hour, because we were discussing the hottest topic of the time in science, Big Bang versus steady state theory of the universe, and the interpretation of the Doppler shift. And my mom arranged for me to be tutored once a week in outside the box science, head of research and development for the company that made the valves, the X1, the first jet to fly faster than the speed of sound, and the X2, the first rocket, I believe it was a rocket plane, but the first plane that took humans to the edge of space. So this was a guy doing really cutting edge work. That's when I was 12. So that's this girl. When she said, I told my mom, you understand the theory of relativity, I knew a lot of science, a lot. But I did not know the theory of relativity. I didn't have the guts, and I didn't have the guts to confess it to her. So as soon as school was out, I pedaled to the library, where the librarians literally took more interest in me than my mother did. And I said, give me everything you've got on relativity. And they slid 2 books, after ruffling around in the stacks. They slid 2 books across their counter to me. One was a great big fat book by Einstein with 2 collaborators, and the other was a little skinny book by Einstein himself. So I started out at 4 in the afternoon in my bedroom, reading the big fat book, because I discovered that if you read something you don't feel you can understand and you make it all the way through to the end, you end up understanding something. And this book was all mathematical equations with only English words per page, and I can understand English words, but I have never been able to understand equations. So I was only 50 pages into the book when 8 o'clock rolled around, and I realized, oh my God, my mom was going to put me to sleep at 10, and I don't understand the theory of relativity yet, and if I haven't understood it by tomorrow morning, I will be humiliated. So I turned to the little skinny book, much of that's against my nature. And in the introduction, written by Albert Einstein himself, it was as if he reached out through the page, grabbed me by the shirt, pulled his nose up to mine, and said, schmuck, listen up. If you want to be a genius, it is not enough to be able to come up with a theory that only 3 men in the world can understand. To be a genius, you have to be able to come up with that theory and then be able to explain it so clearly and so gorgeously that anyone with a high school education and a reasonable degree of intelligence can understand it. So Albert Einstein, when I was 12 years old, gave me my marching orders. If I was going to be an original scientific thinker, and that frankly was the only thing I could possibly have been, no other option was really available to me. Plus, I loved it. I was going to have to become a writer. And not just any writer, I was going to have to become an extraordinary writer. So when Michael Jackson slumped in his seat over the paragraphs of that press release, he was seeing the result of 15 to 20 years of practice, of trying to become a better and better and better and better writer. And the only person on earth who ever saw the art within a press release of mine was Michael Jackson. So then we went downstairs because we had an appointment with the art director from CBS. She was supposed to be coming over with the portfolios of 5 different artists were candidates to do the Jacksons' Victory cover, Victory album cover. So we stood at the billiard table on one side of the table, and the art director came in and stood on the other side of the billiard table and put all these 5 portfolios down on the surface of the pool table. And I was elbow to elbow with Michael. This elbow was at Michael's left elbow. That's my right elbow. My right knee was at Michael's right knee. So I could really feel his muscle language. And we're standing at this billiard table, and the art director slides the first portfolio across to us. It's the work of Michael Whalen. And these portfolios are from the best artists in the field. Absolutely the creme de la creme. Do that because how did I jump ship from neuroscience, grad school of neuroscience, into popular culture? I started an art studio. So I carried a black vinyl portfolio. These were hand-tooled leather and cherry wood. They were gorgeous. So Michael and I are standing there, and Michael opens the first inch, just the first inch of the first picture. And Michael, I don't know if I can show you this. We'll see. Okay, yeah. So he looks at the first picture. He opens the page just one inch, and in that square inch, he goes, "Oh, oh, 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 oh." Michael is having a full-scale aesthetic orgasm. And he sees the infinite in the tiniest of things. He sees the infinite in a one inch of that picture that Michael Whalen never saw the infinite in. He sees things that Michael Whalen never saw in Michael Whalen's work. It's the most astonishing thing I've ever experienced in my life. And what is the second law of science, for God's sakes? Look at things right under your nose as if you've never seen them before, and then proceed from there. Or what is Edna St. Vincent Millay's directive? See the infinite, experience everything you can so you can see the infinite in the tiniest of things. It was stunning. I never expected to see anything like that from a human being of any kind, ever in my life. And I've worked with some of the most important people on the planet. And none of them had this quality of awe and wonder that Michael had. He was all awe and wonder. That was him. It was in every bone, in every muscle of his body, and in every bit of his brain. So when Michael felt that God had given him the gift of this awe and wonder, and because God had given him that gift, he owed that gift to his kids. It was a quality of awe and wonder that he owed them that was beyond anything you are likely ever to see in your lifetime, because there was only one Michael Jackson I've ever met on earth, and nobody else like him. The second meeting that showed me who Michael Jackson was, I used to keep a little cheap red nylon knapsack behind my desk, and it had a TRS-100, the first laptop computer, and it had a spare shirt and a razor blade and a toothbrush. Because I would get calls saying, we're having a disaster here in Atlanta. You've got to be here in 6 hours and solve it for us. So one day I got a call at 4 o'clock in the afternoon saying, you've got to be out here at 11 o'clock tonight, out here meaning LA. Michael is canceling his tour. You're the only one to listen to. So I picked up my little red knapsack. I told my receptionist to get my flight to LA. I headed for the airport, and I made it by 11 o'clock that night at a huge. I went to the address I was given. Turned out to be a huge studio. Buildings like aircraft hangars. They're huge, with these arches over them, and it's the arch is translucent, so you can see the lights from inside at night. But the night buildings are so big. There are so many empty buildings that are dark, totally dark. And the building is so big that you're going to, that it feels like the building swallows light and turns it into darkness. It's a depressing thing. So I entered and saw a 110-foot stage. And the Jacksons were rehearsing on this 110-foot stage. So I waited until the end of their rehearsals, and they had a dressing trailer. You've probably been in dressing trailers.
Yes.
Turned into dressing rooms? Okay. So they had a dressing trailer outside. We all, the brothers and I and Michael, all went to the dressing trailer. The dressing trailer had two banquettes of seats across from each other on the sides of the trailer, and one little tiny seat, big enough for one person, caddy corner to all of these, that was next to the entrance. So Michael took that seat, tiny seat, it was the throne, and I took the seat immediately to his left hand, very much like Newt Gingrich. And Michael explained why he was canceling his tour. Now, up to that point, the tour had been getting terrible, terrible publicity. That's one of the reasons I had been brought in. Dave Marsh, in particular, who is a very influential rock critic, was saying, nobody we know has been hired to build the stage. Nobody we know has been hired to do the lighting. Nobody we know has been hired to do the sound. And nobody we know has been hired to do the security. And we know everybody who's anybody of any degree of competence in the music industry. So the stage is going to collapse. The lighting rigs are going to collapse and kill tens of people at a time. The performers will be electrocuted on stage by their sound system. And because of the inexperience of the security guards, there will be gangs running up and down the aisles with knives. You don't dare let your children go to this concert. Well, look at 6-year-olds. One of my girlfriends, my former girlfriend's kid, was 6 years old when he did this from the age of 3. He carried a little child's cassette recorder around with him, or cassette player, and he had Michael Jackson playing all the time. What is a Michael Jackson concert without kids? So there's Michael sitting at the throne, dark trailer, and me sitting at his left, and he explained, look, I owe my kids the degree of awe, wonder, and surprise that I had. So I wanted to utterly surprise them with this tour. And I hired the best people you could find, the best stage people, the best lighting people, the best sound equipment people, and most important, the best magicians. Sorry for that. I could find. And I signed them all to an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. That's why Dave Marsh had no idea of who was going to be doing the lighting, the sound, the stage construction, not to mention the magic, because Michael wanted to surprise his kids. And as Michael was describing his absolute commitment to his kids, I had something I've only had, I believe, 4 times in my life, a vision. And my other visions have been visceral, gut level. This one was visual. I saw Michael's ribs as golden gates. I saw those golden gates open. I saw 10,000 kids inside. And there was no way Michael was going to let anybody fuck with his kids. So he explained the problem. His brother Jackie had come down with aphasia and had arthroscopic surgery, which was a big surgery back then. And the surgeons thought he'd be better in 3 weeks. He wasn't. And they had no idea how long it was going to take before he was going to be better. And Michael said, look, my brother Jackie is the best dancer I have ever seen. Now think of that for a minute. On the planet. And he thinks brother Jackie is the best dancer he's ever seen. And he said, my brother Jackie is the best choreographer I've ever seen. And he can't make it on this tour. And I owe my kids the best. And if Jackie is not on that stage with me, I am not giving those kids. He is capable of going out on the road with me. And I said, Michael, listen, this tour has been attacked from every conceivable angle. People have been convinced that the whole thing is an amateur disaster. You are validating everything that Dave Marsh has been saying, and parents will not dare come to your concerts. So I understand what you're saying. I want the same thing you do, but you cannot cancel this tour. And Michael listened, and he didn't cancel the tour. And a few weeks ago, let's see if I can find it here without shutting everything down. Let's go to File, Find Recents, Recents, and where's this one? Bear with me, because I think I can get this to you. I had a feeling that I was the only one who really understood Michael. But that can't possibly be true, right? Michael was surrounded by many, many, many talented people. And here's what I wanted to read you. He was surrounded by really brilliant people. Other people had to understand him not only as well as I did, but better than I did, because they got to spend more time with him. My number of encounters with Michael was very small. Well, so I thought this was just my ego talking, thinking that I understood Michael and other people didn't. And then I got a note from a Michael Jackson fan who's been working with me for the last year for free because he so much believes in Michael. And he says, basically, I am wrong, that I did understand Michael in a way nobody understood him. And he said this, your vision, your experience was no choreographed performance or carnival trick. He trusted you. He wouldn't speak to anyone but you. He knew you were the only one to understand him. He spoke and you listened. He wasn't just speaking sound. As you were a man of words and prophecy, his words, his deep words, had a power he knew you would understand. The energy and power brought a companion where you glimpsed his soul, the very soul you had been searching for. In that moment, your journey had come to its fruition. You saw and met the true Michael. You saw and experienced love, his true calling, to love children. You saw them all alive at all times inside his heart. The sick, the well, the abused, the abandoned, burnt, the crippled, the spirit and innocence of the child, that it was his God's ordered mission to rescue, heal, love, and care for, to fill their hearts too with awe and wonder, to surprise, to mesmerize. You witnessed the spirit of childhood, which he wished he could return to and reclaim. You saw Neverland.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. Now the screen where you are again. Bear with me. There we
You gotta
are.
frame that. Print it and frame it. That's serious.
So in his opinion, Michael Jackson fans are fanatics. And yeah, we're back. So Michael Jackson fans study. Can you see me?
It's frozen and I
Hello?
really can't hear you.
Are we connected? Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's totally frozen. It's spinning. It's spinning. Can't see you.